And then when you see the record come up, that means you can go ahead and start.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Uh-huh.
Are we all in there? And the screen on my screen?
I'm in, I can't tell if you are.
We'll walk up there and see what, you can't touch your microphone on.
It looks like you are, John.
Okay.
Put your hand up over your head for a second. Yeah, I think you are. Yeah, I think you're right there.
Okay.
Break a leg.
Let's see. You gonna start off with something funny again? And
I'll
them
let the
bones,
spirit move me.
them bones. Have I told you lately that I love you? Can I tell you once again somehow? Have I told you lately that I love you, little darling? Well, Jude, I'm telling you right now. My heart would break in two if I should lose you. I'm no good without you anyhow. Have I told you lately that I love you, little darling? Well, June, I'm telling you. Well, June, I'm telling you right now. Well, have you got anything to say about that, Miss June?
Are you ready?
Are you ready? Are you ready for the Lord? I'm John Stevenson with Travels with the Stevenson, and are you ready for the Lord?
I'm the wife, June Guyman Stevenson, and I am ready for the Lord. Are you?
Well, we're still doing my life story as I understand it, right, June?
It's chronicles. It's just chronicles of his life. Yes, sweetheart, John.
And since we just got over the midterm elections,
Let me put it in my words. We're just recovering from the elections, as are many candidates nationally and statewide and locally.
you know, folks, I got invitations to go to several different parties, victory parties, or if you lost, sad parties, but got the invitation to go several, but I was so exhausted from campaigning. I campaigned as hard in these elections as I did for my own election, didn't I?
Boy, it brought back a lot of memories of campaigning, canvassing territories.
My
You sang
goodness
your little
gracious.
heart out to all kinds of candidates this go around.
I certainly did. Of course, we had a couple that lost, it was really sad.
Very sad.
Terry King Showboard didn't quite make it, come very close.
Very close.
And of course, one of my gripes was the legal group, the lawyers that came in with their little committee and I think it was a conflict of interest, frankly, myself, but came in with their hidden contributions. And I just wonder if that's legal or not. That's sort of like picking your judge that you want to be before and having that influence with them. And particularly when you don't know where the funds are coming from, other than quote unquote the group of attorneys. I would think there'd be somewhat of a conflict of interest there. But those things happen in life. We leave that up to the legislature to correct that sort of
And
thing.
bigger than that, we leave it up to God.
And bigger than that, we leave it up to God.
I am very confident that Terry, as the Christian woman that she is, has already put before the Lord that she did her best, and
Right.
God's will was done in the results. We can't always understand what His will is in campaigns and in life.
And why it happens.
Right.
And no disrespect for the lady that won. I didn't know her personally, and I of course knew Terry King Schoberg's father, worked with him on the railroad in the 1960s, when I was secretary of the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen. And, which brings us to our topic today, I guess, since it's elections, and we're talking about the elections as we go through this. We lost that one, we lost some others, and, I'm sure they'll be back running again, and we won a lot. Kim Mosier won, and we were deeply involved trying to help there and singing for her. We sang for Terry, sang for Judge Zala over in Campbell County, and he won. Invited us to his party over there, and we wish we could have gone, but we were totally exhausted. I needed sleep.
I'll be honest, we were invited to a lot of little, events post-election, and I told John, I said, you have a date with me in front of the TV in our pajamas, and that's where we spent watching the results come in.
That's right.
Best post-election party I've ever been to.
Right, right.
Something happened when I turned 65. Pajamas sound a whole lot better these days.
Yeah. Well, I sang for Ed Massey,
You
state
sang a
representative in
lot.
Boone County. And
You
he
were
won.
wearing me out.
He won despite even the governor being against him from his own party. There's something in this mixture here that is a little hard for me to comprehend. Of course, I used to be a Democrat, then I was a Republican, now I'm an independent. And I'm helping out a guy that's running as a Republican, but then the Republican governor supports an independent candidate. Whoa, man,
Did you catch that?
this
'Cause
is hard
I got lost.
This is hard for the brain to work through. And,
Well, and that was the reason we decided today, since this is 2 days out from election day. So today is November the 8th, 2018. And we were gonna talk about John's life. He has done so much in his life, and in your personal life, we only got up through Kenton Elementary.
right,
We were starting his time in Simon Kenton High School, but we decided, since John was so involved, and still is involved politically, with supporting people who are for godly principles. I'm sorry, that is our agenda. We vote for people who we believe that want to practice and serve with godly principles. Because whether you're a Christian or not, if you operate in the principles of God, you're gonna have honest government. You're gonna have a solid government. You're not gonna have a fractured or divisive government. So we thought we would try to talk a little bit today about
tie those things together.
yeah, and how you got involved in politics yourself, just a little bit.
Well, including Thomas Massey won his race, which I predicted.
Well, what did he win? Because some
The
people may
United
not
States
know.
Congress. People, let me ask you, what's a congressman do? Well, I worked for a congressman. One of the first campaigns I ran, it was a big part of, was with Congressman John B. Breckinridge. And, went to Washington DC with him to help set up his office, and then came back and worked as his field representative and handled all education-related matters and all agriculture-related matters and all energy-related matters in the 70s there, which was quite a challenge with the energy crisis that we had. But the office of the congressman, like Thomas Massey, the most important function is to serve your constituents and to vote with godly principles.
Okay, hold that thought for just a second. So we're gonna take back a couple steps. So one of John's hats in life was being an advanced government teacher. So I'm forever learning the function of government because I don't fully understand it myself, and I'm not sure many people do. So that's what we thought we would tap into today, the role of governmental positions.
Right.
So, because I didn't fully understand, what does a congressman do? Who do they represent? How many are there per state?
Right.
As well as what's a senator? What's the difference between a state senator and a state representative and a congressman and a US senator? Those are
Okay.
things that how many people, how much do you really know about that?
Well, the first thing you do, you look at the big picture. The big picture is the United States and America. And in the United States, each state has 2 senators, regardless of the size of the state. That gives your state a particular balance of, shall we say, strength in the writing of legislation and in the dealing with government. So you have 2 senators per state, whereas congressmen are based on the population, not the state.
Okay, stay with the Senate for a second.
Okay,
US senators.
The US senators, they
There are only
represent
2
the,
per
only
state.
2 per state,
How long are their terms?
6 years.
And why is that?
Well, because a senator represents the whole state, and they figure that he has to be a much bigger campaign. His role is for stabilization of the government, the length of time. The senators are more of a diplomat for the state, as well as they approve judicial appointments, for instance. We have probably the most powerful, and I might add, effective senator in the country, in Senator Mitch McConnell. And then we have another senator who is very influential because of his style, number one. Number two, he's very outspoken, extremely well versed on the laws and on the functions of the office, and that's Rand Paul. Now, as senators, they are spokesmen for Kentucky, but their influence, quite frankly, is much greater than other states have with their senators because of their abilities and their length of service. Your time in the Senate is basically, and in the House, but in the Senate we're talking about right now, is basically based upon your seniority. In other words, the longer you're there, elected to be there, the more seniority you have, which allows you to choose the committees that you want to be on. You have a little more influence. Like Senator McConnell is majority leader of the Senate. And a key thing that just happened, quite frankly, now 2016 was like an earthquake in politics when Donald Trump and Mike Pence together won the presidential race against what many people considered great odds. Didn't think it was possible. In fact, nobody predicted that he would even get through the original Republican primary with 17, 18 candidates, many of them well qualified. It was an unbelievable win. That's the reason that I, frankly, have said that, and some people would disagree with this, but this is how I feel. I believe that he's been ordained by the hand of God in that selection and in the people's willingness to tolerate some of his idiosyncrasies and because of his ability to get things done.
He has a Twitter syndrome.
He has a Twitter syndrome, that's right. But he's also got a syndrome of being able to really see what the real issues are in an event and how to negotiate them. And Congress and the Senate is a big part of it is negotiations because everybody has different ideas and different strengths. So that's Senator McConnell. Now,
let me ask you a question. How, we have 2 US senators.
Yes.
What area, do they both cover the Commonwealth of Kentucky, or is
Both
each
cover-
assigned to?
no,
So they are
they're right to the state,
all of them do the same in every state?
all 120 counties in every state, your 2 senators represent
Everybody?
everybody in the
Okay.
state.
All right.
Now, your congressmen don't do that.
Okay.
Like in Kentucky, it's based upon the size of your population. We have 6 congresspersons and from Kentucky. We used to have 7.
Do they base that on
Population.
population?
Mhm.
Okay,
For every, I think it's around 535,000, something like that.
okay.
And that you have in your district. So each district, and now your congressman then, like our congressman, Thomas Massey, who won re-election here, I guess a gentleman by the name of Seth, someone I believe it is, but that was part of his problem, not enough people really knew him. But their strongest candidate, I actually think, got defeated in the primary because they didn't think that she could get beat. But Thomas Massey is very strong. Look at how big he won the race, better 2-1, you know. So, and he is a worker. Now, he is a different personality too, but he has earned respect because of his character. Even more respect from me. I don't agree with him on some issues, but it's easier for me to be with him now because I see why he's doing what he's doing. And, he represents northern Kentucky, down the river to almost to Louisville, part of that area right down there. And then all the way down on the eastern side of the state, sort of down the rivers, both ways.
Well, let's go back, let's stay with the senators for just a second. So what is their role?
Their role is to,
In a nutshell.
is to be the overseers of the diplomats. The senators do the judicial hearings. That's the reason they had all the hearings on the Supreme Court and the other courts. Hundreds of judges get confirmed, plus they confirm the president's appointees
Okay.
on other positions also. They play a major role in that, and they are the stabilizing body.
Are they lawmakers? Do they make laws, or is?
No, they help to make laws. I
Okay.
mean, the laws, there are laws that come from the House,
They go to,
they go to the Senate, then they can compromise, they can have joint sessions they send to where both sides, a committee from both sides look at the laws, and it's a process. Somebody compares it to making sausage, and they grind it out.
Okay.
And
All right.
but anyway, we got all these congressmen now. Kentucky gets 6 congressmen. California might have 40 congressmen
Okay.
because of the population.
Texas.
Texas might have 40. I'm not sure exactly how many, but in other words, it's based upon the population of the state from the last census.
Okay.
And then when they change, then they redistrict. They do a redistricting thing so that your position in your state might actually move a little bit
How many,
for congressperson.
how many US senators are there? Either 2 per state.
2 per
so
state,
we have,
there's 50 states,
okay.
100 senators.
So in this election that just took place, where were we before election day?
Well,
With
before election
Republicans,
day,
Independents, and Republicans?
yes, you had 51 Republicans before this election,
Okay,
and you had 49 Democrats.
okay.
And that was one of the reasons that they had a terribly difficult time, because if just one Republican, like what happened to them on the healthcare bill, they had it ready to throw out Obamacare completely,
Mhm.
and it failed to pass by 1 vote. Senator McCain voted against it, and at the last minute. And so they're still left with remnants of that Obamacare.
Okay.
And the mandatory fact of having it. Now, whether that'll change or not, who knows for sure. But one thing did happen. The people spoke loud and clear that they wanted the Republicans to have more influence. So they have elected this time, in this midterm elections, even though you heard all the talk about the blue wave and the Democrats were gonna take over and take charge. Well, in the Senate, they actually lost 3, maybe 4, we don't know for
But-
sure
but
yet, seats.
In the US Senate?
The US Senate, the Democrats lost.
Oh, I thought you were talking,
No, the
okay.
Republicans picked up, they
Okay.
went from 51 to maybe either 53 or 54, depending upon one state that hasn't come in
And
yet.
that's still undecided. There are, Arizona?
Arizona and then possibly
Sally
Florida.
and Cinema are the ladies'
Yeah, well, there's one
names.
one in Florida that's,
Contesting.
that's, I think, the
President
governor's.
recount,
But
no,
no,
DeSantis won, and,
but that was a governorship, right?
right, but, Nelson and Scott
Scott.
won,
He's ahead, he's won, but they might have to have a recount.
but the,
Or they're asking
but the
for a
US
recount.
senator who has been let's see, how long has he been there? He's been there for, I
Long
think they
time.
said 40 years. No offense, Mr. Nelson, but there is a time to go, so go on home.
Well, I think he's gonna go, cause, Scott was ahead considerably, and,
I don't think he could handle the loss.
I know, it's hardly hard.
One thing John taught me was a thing called Potomac fever. Would you like to share with us before we go into the house, what Potomac fever is?
Potomac fever is where my boss, back in the 70s, was Congressman John Breckinridge.
Which we will fill you in all on another day when we continue John's life saga.
Yes.
But
And-
today,
Anyway, he was born and raised early in Washington DC, actually, an old mansion out on the Potomac River called Salubria.
Okay.
And, I went up there with him many times, and his mother was still alive, and she lived in which was, like the storage shed, but it was like a little house.
Okay.
This was a big place, right there on the Potomac.
He put his mother in the shed?
Well, no, she liked it out there. It was, I think it was a smokehouse.
Like,
where
there's a few people
where
I'd
they-
like to put in our shed and throw away the key.
And anyway,
Forgive me, Father,
so
for I
he
have
was
sinned.
very familiar with Washington DC. In fact, I was quite proud of him because he is actually the congressman that introduced legislation to give Washington DC home rule.
Okay.
And, that was a very magnanimous thing for him to do. He was on one of the committees and he actually introduced that legislation while I worked for him. And it was, a great blessing to, particularly the African American community, which, lives right there in Washington DC. And so,
So what was his warning and
his warning to
advice
me was,
you?
John, I'm taking you up there to Washington with me to help set up the office. He said, now I wanna tell you something. There's such a disease up here called Potomac fever.
Mhm.
I thought, well, what's that? You know, and so he said, when you get up here, there'll be limousines, there'll be free tickets, there'll be people trying to influence you the very day you show up. And he said, and a lot of people that come to Washington have all these things starting to pop out at them, and all these fancy dinners, and all these beautiful places, and the football games, and the baseball games,
All the perks.
and everything. And he said, they'll try to buy your soul. And he said, just remember, don't catch Potomac fever, because if you get your hand in the cookie jar, and he took his hand up like that, and he said, you get your hand in the cookie jar, I'm gonna lop it off one finger at a time. And I said, oh my.
So there,
And so there,
that was a great advice.
it's great advice, and I'll tell you why it was great advice. Because one of the things I learned that Donald Trump talked a great deal about, cleaning the swamp. The swamp even needed to be cleaned back then.
Regardless
And
of,
believe me, John Breckenridge and I did some cleaning of the swamp.
regardless of what party you're affiliated with, whether you like President Trump or not, you know, he one of the things that he, campaigned on was cleaning out the swamp, and all of us as citizens of the country realize that there's Potomac fever, and there's corruption, and there's this and there's that, and we know there was a swamp.
Well,
But
yeah,
regardless of what party you're in,
Yeah.
nobody realized how big and nasty the swamp was and is.
and how wasteful it is.
Yeah.
And can be. And what do we mean by swamp now? We talked about congresspersons, we talked about senators. You have a little more power.
Did you say senators or senators?
Senators. You have congressmen and you have senators. Well, senators have the 6-year term. So
So they're called
that's,
US senators.
that's the reason they're much more powerful.
Okay.
Because, and even more powerful over the bureaucracies, because the bureaucracies, thousands of employees, I mean thousands, and you have thousands of agencies, thousands of them. You have these great departments, including the Department of Education,
Mhm.
Interior, Highways, Transportation, all these departments. It's like little fingers out there of bureaucracy. All of them with their own appointees and their own merit system employees. Now, what happens when you go in there as a congressperson? They know you've only got 2 years, and then you have to run again. That's one of the bad things about that short term.
I
Because-
agree.
Because when you're there and you're trying to use influence to get your problems taken care of in your district,
You're also campaigning.
well, you're also campaigning all the time because that's the way you gotta stay elected. And you have the problem of the bureaucracy looks at you, and when you ask them to do something that's ethical and legal, and if they don't wanna do it for political reasons or personal reasons or whatever,
Mhm.
they look at you with the attitude, unfortunately, not all of them, not most of them, but many of them do, look at you with the attitude of, you're gone in 2 years. I'm here for a lifetime. Now, that's one thing that needs to be changed in government.
How would that be introduced? That would be a new legislation?
Well, you have to
or-
have some new legislation. You have to do what Donald Trump did with the Veterans Association. They passed some legislation where somebody could be fired or sent on to other types of things they wanted to do in work if they didn't do the right things. You have to have some influence as an administrator. Now, that doesn't mean that you can go in for political reasons and just start whacking off heads, but you have to have a balance. But one of the things that has happened in our federal government, of the size of the government, you gotta remember, look at this fact. You've got your senators are there for 6 years. Your congressmen are only there for 2 years. But they're managing, along with the president, they're managing a tremendously large size government. And when government gets too big, it gets bulky, it gets overruns, and then the theory comes in, whether it's state government or federal government, of let's increase our budget, whether we need it or not, because if we don't ask for the funds, we won't get any extra funds. And the key point in all this, and saying all this, is we're almost $22 trillion in debt as a country.
Hard to
And
imagine.
somewhere down the line, you have to pay. There is no such thing as a free lunch. And so that's one of the things that I got involved with in being responsible and working for the congressman, knowing senators and having worked with them in their campaigns, and having run for office myself, and that is be efficient. And that's one of the things that people really like about Donald Trump, and you saw it again in this midterm elections. I mean, I have never seen in my life, 75 years, that I've actually been seeing in my adult lifetime, any presidential candidate or vice presidential candidate, Donald Trump or Mike Pence, I've never seen any two people who've worked harder at fulfilling their promises and commitments. Whether you agree with them or not, that's your own thought out there. But they have worked hard to fulfill those commitments. And never have I seen the media across the nation, the national media, be so biased as they have been. And a good example of that was the other night when the first press conference, and there's been nobody accessible to the press more than Donald Trump and Mike Pence have been. They have been accessible, I mean, to the point where if he goes somewhere and flies somewhere, he answers questions when he gets off the plane. You know, he's been very good about that. But he was personally attacked by the first questioner from CNN News, shamefully. And then he uses his question to make his own speech. Well, the press's role is to get answers, but it's not to set your own platform out there and try to use it as a way to attack the president or the senator or the congresspersons. That's not your role as a press person. Get the facts and report the facts honestly.
You're there to be a reporter, not an editorial.
Right. If you're gonna do editorial, get on the cable
Find your
channel
own-
and
Right,
do your own thing and label it as editorializing, you know. There's enough of that, there's plenty of it. But the thing about Donald Trump, the reason he was able to override that, and everybody thought there's gonna be a big blue wave for the Democrats, they all were predicting it. President Obama, every place he went to speak, they lost. Every place Donald Trump went to speak and had these huge crowds, they won. Now, there's something to be said in that. And when you look at it, the first time, 2016, you might be able to say, well, that's maybe a fluke, just a happening. But to come back and do it again in the middle-term elections, that was unbelievable. And I'll tell you what, you and I sit and watched the last rally that he had and how he handled the sickness of a lady in the audience was so calm and patience of standing there and then asking 12, 13,000 people that were in the stadium there or more outside, asking them to silently wait till she got help from the
It was
emergency
almost,
review.
like around a 10-minute spot where someone who took ill during the rally, and he just said, let's stop.
Let's wait, we got
While
plenty
the
of time.
emergency service folks came in to tend to her, and then he injects, let's everybody pray. And there was this absolute silence, which also to me, with that kind of crowd, how that crowd maintained this
Dignity and decorum.
and decorum while this was all going on. And then, as they were taking this lady out on a stretcher, someone started singing Amazing Grace, and the entire audience was singing Amazing Grace. It was something never seen before, and probably, we were totally in shock,
And
in a good way.
And his ability to stand there for that length of
Yeah,
time,
the patience and
The
respect
patience.
for a person.
right from it, in the middle of a speech, to be able to do that after making 2 previous stops,
The same day,
the same day,
same amount of people.
same amount of people, plus
Mhm.
10 or 11 stops in the last week or so. It was just amazing. I have tremendous respect for his abilities to do that.
Well, I wanna go back and talk about the role of the president and the vice president, but let's wrap up the House.
Well, the House,
How
we
many-
did with
so how
6
many
congresspersons.
how many people are, what are they called?
Well,
Representatives?
Representatives, they're congressmen,
Congressmen, okay.
or congresswomen,
So roughly, how many Congress people are there?
535 in the whole nation,
Okay,
but in the House of Representatives, 100 senators, but in the congressman in Kentucky, to give you for instance, we have 6.
okay.
Now
And
this
their term is 2
2
years.
years, all of them are 2 years,
Okay,
and they have to run every 2 years.
and their role is,
Introduce legislation,
so they are the lawmakers.
they are the lawmakers. Any bill with, I believe with finances, has to come out of the House,
Okay,
begin there and work its way through.
healthcare,
Healthcare, everything starts from the House and then goes to the Senate. And then they both have to vote on it. In the end, they have to agree.
okay,
They come to a compromise committee. And now, the one thing that the Democrats did do, they took over by a slight margin.
at this
At this
election.
midterm elections, they took over the majority in the House. So they'll have I think it's about a 12 vote majority that they picked up. So they'll have a majority in the House of Representatives, which will allow them to have the Speaker of the House now, which they'll do by, and it'll be Speaker Pelosi again, the way it looks.
And what is the speaker's role?
They handle the meetings, they set the agenda, so they have influence now. And they can do subpoenas, they have chairmen, they're allowed to appoint the chairmen to the committees, all the committees. So
Okay.
you've seen all these committees working, for the Republicans with, Congressman Nunes and all those committees. Now those committees will have their own chairman, so Adam Schmidt, I think his name is, or Schiff or something like that. He's
Shifty?
Well, must be nice now.
Sorry for getting you
And,
involved.
but anyway, he will be now chairman of that committee. So
Okay.
we'll see how they act and what they do. They've made promises. Some of them have promised they're gonna impeach the president or try to. They can't, but,
Wasted time for sure.
wasted time for sure. So they've threatened all kinds of investigations. If Trump hasn't been investigated enough after this Mueller, ridiculous investigation, they're not gonna find anything if he hasn't found something. And there is no such thing as Russian collusion, by the president. I mean, that's a pretty given. But the Russians and the Chinese and many others probably are involved in trying to, keep a check on our elections. They'd like to create strife. They haven't been able to come in and control any elections yet that I've seen the evidence of it all. But they would like to have strife. They like to see the confrontations between the parties and the media and everything, because that makes our democracy look weak in their eyes. But actually, your democracy is meant to be several groups with ideas coming together. And like I said, it's like making sausage. So that's what your congressmen do, that's what your senators do, and then of course your president, he has the ultimate, he's the commander in chief, and he has the ultimate responsibility for our national defense and to oversee that. And he has a tremendous bureaucracy himself. He has appointees to all of those different organizations that I told you about. But even those appointees sometimes have difficulties with the bureaucracies because they are looked at and being, well, how long are you here? You're here maybe 2 years in an appointed job because you serve at the pleasure of the president. Just like in some of the positions that I've served in, I serve at the position of the congressman, or I serve at the feelings of the governor or the secretary, or, so you don't know how long you're gonna be in any of those positions.
Well, you held up well with all your head rollings.
Well, that's right. That's right.
Your head has rolled a couple times
That's right.
because you were honest.
Well, I have been honest, I can honestly
And
say
that's why
that.
I'm so proud of you.
Well, thank you.
But you have to buy me lunch too
It's
for
have to
saying
buy you
that.
lunch for
I'm
saying.
driving him right here on TV.
And, but we had some great victories in this election though too, that I was thrilled to sing for these people. Ed Massey won out there, I told you about that. Kim Mosier won, Representative St. Ange won, sang for her, and sang for, Thomas Massey.
Are you trying to associate the fact that your singing helped them win?
I don't know, that's questionable. Cause I sang for Randy Blankenship too, for Mayor of Erlanger. And I still haven't quite gotten over the fact that he lost, and I sang for Terry King Showberg.
You
and she
just
lost.
never know, do you?
No, I'm really still amazed at that, although I had to admit, the very first time I sang for him, some of his people came to me and asked me about if he had any problems in his race, any concerns about the race. And I told him then, I said, now, I don't know this lady, but I said, I can tell you by watching how she's campaigning, this is not something to take for granted because she was a worker. I
Her
mean,
and her family.
her and her
supporters.
family were all workers, were hard workers.
So this is the Erlanger mayoral
Yes,
race,
I think her name's Pete,
okay.
something like that. And, but she beat a strong candidate,
Surprised us.
and,
We're proud of her. I mean, we know how hard it
Oh,
is to
yes.
run a campaign, whether it's local or
Yeah.
statewide. It's brutal.
yeah. But I think on the long-term experience, Randy was just
Mhm,
very experienced.
mhm.
And, he's a great asset to Erlanger, and he's a great human being. And, I was sad to see him lose, but I could understand what happened there with the way she worked and the way she door-to-doored it and had her people going door-to-door. And, the people of Erlanger wanted something, what they considered to be new.
Mhm.
And, so,
You know something, John, that I've noticed that, and a lot of people are doing the door-to-door, but today's technology is, I thought about all the times you ran for office that I was along for the ride, so to speak, and what it would have been like if you had Facebook then, or the ability
yeah.
with all, cell phone, computers to be able to get your message out, where there,
Yeah.
then and there, it was being there in person and driving across Kentucky
Oh,
was
yeah.
brutal.
it was brutal, brutal. I've traveled.
Especially when you aren't funded by anyone, it's
That's
all coming
right.
out of your own pocket.
That's right. Well, funds do make a big difference. I have to tell you, the money that is spent in these campaigns today is phenomenal.
Mhm.
I think it's almost a sin, frankly, to be honest with
There
you.
should be